I'm Saita Goyal, one of the core team members of BSides Bangalore and W3-CS. Now, I'm super excited to welcome you all to the BSides Bangalore podcast, which is in collaboration with W3-CS, Worldwide Women in Cybersecurity. Now, sit back, listen to this podcast, and learn all about cybersecurity. Hello, guys. Good morning. Thanks for joining into the B-Sides podcast. Today, I have Suvabrata Sinha with me. Now, he's a person who's been there for more than 2 decades in this cybersecurity domain. He's on the other line. Today, I am privileged enough to have a conversation with him, knowing about him and getting to know about what excited him to get into cybersecurity. Hey, Subrata, thanks for joining in. How have you been?
Thank you. Good morning. It is a privilege to be with all of you in this podcast. And thank you for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share my story, so to say. And I hope it inspires at least one person in this whole wide universe to take up this exciting career.
Super. So, Subrata, before I get into the questions, right, I would want the audience to know who Suvabrata Sinha is, because today we get to know about the professional level at LinkedIn, which we do get to know that, okay, this person has been from this company. I want to know about your journey, how you came into cybersecurity, where did it all start?
Thank you. My journey has been a very interesting one. And I would say rather like the accidental prime minister, I've been an accidental cybersecurity person. I started my career of all things as a chartered accountant. And then just by fortuitous coincidence, I would love to claim deep foresight, and I had seen the future and I knew what was happening. And I had great wisdom, but unfortunately it was a series of fortuitous accidents. And I just took the opportunities, and one thing led to another, and here I am. So I started my career with Deloitte in the early 90s. And just around that time, Deloitte was setting up an IT audit practice. It was in the aftermath of the 90s security scam, and all the banks were computerizing, National Stock Exchange was set up, BSE was computerizing, a lot of things were happening. And Deloitte wanted to set up its IT audit practice. And I think I was one of the few who dared to join a completely new practice that nobody had heard about. And had my passion for computers. I could code, and I was very comfortable with computers. So, one thing led to another. And of course, every career moves need someone who is willing to take a risk on you, right? Knowing that you have no demonstrated skill on that front. And my mentor in those days, a gentleman called Abhay Gupte, he said, okay, dude, join and let's see what we can do together. That was the beginning. You could say I was young, I was foolish, but that's how interesting journeys in life start. Then I did a stint in KPMG, Information Risk Management. I worked with Wipro for a very brief while. And by then I wanted to come out of consulting. And I wanted to be a practitioner. I said that, I can't write audit reports for a living, right? I need some more excitement in life. So I joined Bank of America's Global Competency Center, which was just about being set up. And I think I was their 200th employee or something. I knew nothing of how operational security works in a large scale. Again, fortunately, I had a manager in US and the managing director in India who was willing to take a risk on my passion and said, okay, dude, join. I hope you can succeed, and let's do it. And that led me to operational cybersecurity. I set up a large security operations center. We did pretty much something of everything. We grew to 230, 40 odd people. And but then I felt there was a void. There's something I know nothing about, which is security engineering. And how does engineering at scale for cybersecurity products work. And then again, one thing led to another, and I joined Microsoft as the director for digital security risk engineering. Again, my great fortune in life has always been that I found these leaders who were willing to take risks on me. And somebody did take a risk on me, and thank you, Joe. So I joined Microsoft, and that was again another very, very exciting period where I learned the nitty-gritties of security engineering. And then I felt that, okay, I think I'm ready for executive leadership, maybe a CISO or a deputy CISO kind of role. And of course, I know nothing about it and how it works in real life. And again, one thing led to another, and I joined NXP Semiconductors as their head of cybersecurity, and then I got promoted to their CISO, and that was also a very, very exciting time in my life. I have very recently left NXP, and I'm exploring options for what can I do with my life for the next 10 years. And so here we are. In conclusion, I would say always think about your career 1, 2, 3 years ahead. Don't be afraid to desire more, and search, and you will find someone who will take a risk on you. It usually works that way.
Superb. I think your need for knowledge and knowing new things has led you to this point in your life. And also, it's just not about the other person taking risk in you, even you're taking a risk. That, okay, I'm going into an unknown domain. So that works. I know people who are wanting to get into cybersecurity, knowing a little bit from your journey, would want to get into cybersecurity and will be willing to take a risk. Now, you said that your keen interest was not knowing about this thing. But now once you're into the cybersecurity domain, how are you keeping yourself updated on things?
Interesting question. So I try to read a lot as much as I can. I also think that you cannot be a cybersecurity professional by just reading and creating PowerPoint slides. Right? So I try to do my own labs.
All right.
Most of the labs fail splendidly, miserably, and in every which they can fail, they all fail. But I feel that through the process, I learn something new, right?
All right.
And to me, it's not whether the lab succeeds or not, but the fact that I do it and, struggle through it. And it gives me insight about how features work, how products work, how different things can be threaded together. And I learn that way. The third way that I learn is that I try to attend conferences and workshops where I have practitioners speaking.
All right.
And so I train myself to ignore designations of speakers.
All right.
And see, is it somebody who does that thing who is speaking?
All right.
Versus maybe the most senior, most people in that organization who knows it, but not really hands-on with it.
Okay.
So that drives me. So I attend a lot of technical conferences as much as I can, and BSides is a great example.
Now, Subrata, you have been in the industry for so long. You have worked in large-scale industries with security programs, right? Can you highlight some challenges that you faced and the successful outcomes that you have achieved during this phase when you were working with these industries?
So, thank you. That's an interesting question. And I would say, what is success? Because in any cybersecurity improvement initiative, success usually happens with the moment of truth, right? And there is an attack and you manage to, either track it, spot it, identify it, triage it, mitigate it before a lot of harm has been done. Right? But then you don't really want that moment of truth, right? You prefer a peaceful life. So I'd say what is success is an interesting way to frame problem statements as well. And the most recent one that I could cite is that in NXP we did a factory security improvement initiative. And that was an interesting problem space because, as you know, factories are typically the soft underbelly for any hybrid enterprise. Tons of legacy, lots of OT, IoT. Most of them are now, hey presto, networked. Many of them cannot be upgraded, patched, maybe out of support, and yet now you have to secure it. So how do you do that? And of course, factories, especially if you're in the process industry or discrete manufacturing, their factories done all the time. So how do you analyze, find time to analyze, find time to triage, find time to put the right mitigation measures? All of these are not just the technical challenge, especially when it comes to operational technology, but also a program management challenge. And then how do you keep it refreshed? So our factory security initiative was one, I think I'm particularly proud of it, because we managed to put in a fairly decent defense in depth posture around the factories. But it's like all large security initiatives, it's always going to be a work in progress, because you always need to do something else from your huge long list of backlog.
All right.
And by the time you have groomed your backlog to any reasonable level, new vulnerabilities are showing up on things that you have already fixed. Right? So factory security, I would say, is an interesting space right now across the industry.
All right. So one question came here, because this was a factory setup, right? You were able to control this environment a little bit. It was in your control. Okay, I have these things coming in, these things going out. These are what I could see, the loopholes. I could fix the vulnerabilities. Now, let's say when you're managing risk and security, right? When you're approaching these at managing at a region level, how do you go? Let's say regions such as India, Europe, USA. And because see, again, when we are taking cybersecurity into picture, there are a lot of rules and regulations which are there. Each regions have different regulatory landscapes or threat landscapes also. How do you approach managing them?
I would maybe frame it a little differently, especially for large enterprises. The threat landscape are sort of now the same across the enterprise.
Okay.
Because if put the bad actor / hacker hat on, and if you are the bad actor, you just want the weakest link in the chain. You don't really care whether it's in Europe, India, like Asia, US, wherever it is, and whatever it is. Be it a lab, be it a factory, be it a research establishment within the enterprise, be it a third-party processing center with a dedicated link, right? Be it a cloud presence managed by somebody else. I mean, so you are just probing for the weakest link in the chain. So the threat landscape is uniform. What I think changes is the culture, because each culture across the world are very, very unique. In Europe, for example, most employees, most citizens are very, very privacy conscious, and they are very skeptical often about new complex technologies, unless they are aware of what the privacy security trade-off is. So often you need to spend time to explain it to them, explain the risk-reward benefits, because obviously you lose something with every new technology that comes up. There is always a trade-off. And those conversations take a little time and some convincing, and you have to cater to that as part of your plan. In Asia, it's different. Like privacy is not so much of a concern, but there are, different languages, and how you implement something in India versus how do you do it in Malaysia and in Taiwan will have to be very different.
All right.
Right. So you have to cater to the culture. We did lots of interesting experiments, for example, as part of red teaming and phishing simulations. There are some cultures where anything that you send in their native language, people are extremely trustful.
All right.
So if I send something to you, let's say in Hindi, you will trust it. Maybe not, but I'm taking Hindi as an example. But around the world, there are many cultures where an email or a fish sent in native languages has a far higher probability of being successful. So you need to tune your awareness differently. You need to tune your defenses differently. Right? Some cultures have a very high power distance. If you can fish in the name of their skip level manager or the managing director, it will be opened and instructions will be followed. Okay. People naturally presume their first reaction is that if it comes from a manager or from a managing director, I must do it right now. Questions matter. So that will tend to succeed eventually. Okay. Hackers know it. Right? Bad actors know it. They understand psychology as well as I do, if not better. So it is not good defense is not about just technology. It's about understanding culture and psychology a little more deeply and with more nuance.
I think this is the entire that experience and everything, that culture plays a very important part. And the fishing example where you gave, right? If you tell someone in their own language, they'll interest it better and might fall for it. How do you go about it? It's really nice. In the previous question, when I asked you, you also mentioned about you running a operation center, right? Now, when you started this operation center, the security operation center, what were the strategies that you employed in setting it up, and how did you go about managing it?
I have actually had the good fortune of setting up security operations center more than once. I did it once in Bank of America. We did it once in Microsoft, and again in NXP. And again, as I shared right at the beginning, that in my journey, every mistake that a person can make, I have made in different parts of my career. Right? So what have I learned? I mean, I think that the construct of one large SOC to rule them all does not work.
Okay.
I mean, you can get probably some minor economies of scale and cost efficiencies. It may be one large SOC may be cheaper than 2-3 SOCs, but it does not work. I mean, nobody likes to do night shifts, for example, even if they say they're okay to take a break. And my rule of thumb is that if I am not willing to do it myself, I don't think I should expect my team members to do it.
All right.
So I favor at least 2 security operation centers federated, if not 3, and just follow the sun and follow the case. The second part is exactly that. The cultural nuances play a part. Right? I mean, the more diverse your representation in your security operations team, the better they understand these nuances about the actual threats and how it impacts the user base. And I feel that responses are much more informed. People react and respond in a more informed way. They bring more diverse perspectives to case management, and the outcome is much more favorable.
All right.
So, so if I have to do another SOC another time, again, I'll follow the same thing. Not even at the cost of spending more money, it's better to do 2 or 3.
All right. So I think one of them was culture. Was there any other key lessons that you learned from this while setting it up?
People. Culture is one, second is people. I mean, a SOC is not an army of homogeneous 20 people. Whatever else it looks in business cases, in spreadsheets, I mean, it is about people. Right? So you need the right people. You need to have the right people. people who are willing to experiment, people who are willing to stand up, people who have a bias for action, demonstrated bias for action. And even at the risk of, if you are a SOC analyst and you see something happening, and if you think I will wait for approval till next day morning, then it will be too late.
Correct.
You have to be the kind of person who will do what needs to be done then, and then explain later why it had to be done. And sure, out of 20 times, one time there will be some disruption and there will be some escalation, but that's par for the course.
All right.
So you need the right people, whoever they are.
Okay. Now, I wanted to know that when you're running these operation centers, right, there are a lot of information that we get through when we are analyzing the particular packets or any data, right? Now, how much does innovation and intellectual property take place when you're running a SOC?
I would answer that question in two parts.
Okay.
One is that any SOC, and I don't mean just a security operation center, right? If you are running a cybersecurity defensive operation, which is the monitoring team, the threat analysis team, the automation team, the whole defensive operations team, constantly generate new innovation. And that should be one of the objectives of running defensive operations, that you constantly generate new innovation, and you some of those are trade secrets. There are different ways of securing intellectual property that comes out of it. So could be trade secrets, some could be patentable, but it goes back to the culture, that if you defensive operations teams have to focus on creating the culture of people think in this innovative way. In one of my stints, there was a bright young analyst who created a detection model based on an open sourced model used by the financial community at the end of the financial the crash in 2008-2009. So there is a model that tracks the share price movement to find anomalies of insider trading as a leading indicator of a potential, adverse action on that company. And that model was tuned to track for anomalies in the threat intel feed that comes out of our own systems. Right?
Okay.
It was an interesting approach to security problem solving by leveraging something that has been done in the financial industry for monitoring for insider trading in stocks. But it did work for a pretty long period of time. So, and that is innovation, where you think differently. And it is the duty of leaders, but also I think for the team as a whole to think that how do we think differently? Right? Because there is never going to be enough people and enough time and enough money to monitor everything and everyone and be on top of all the threat signals that come in. You have to be selective, you have to be focused, and that's where innovation comes in.
Super. All right, so you wear a lot of different hats, Subrata. When I was going through your profile, right, one of the hats you wear is you mentor a lot of women in India for cybersecurity. Not even women, you mentor men also. So, but when you're mentoring these mentees, what's the approach that you take in basically, let's say, encouraging and supporting them? Let's say I'm a newcomer to cybersecurity, right? What's your approach to helping us get into cybersecurity or entering this field?
So the thing that I try to do is to help my mentees define what do you really want.
Okay.
Right? And like in this conversation, I could pose the same question to you. What do you really want? And if you start framing it and start writing it down and you start deconstructing it it is not a simple question.
Correct.
It's a fairly non-trivial problem
Mhm.
at an individual level. And once you start exploring what do you really want, and then as a mentor, I can maybe point you to the right people or the right resources and maybe challenge your construct a bit. And I think that is one of the key roles of a mentor. Helping my mentees look at things and situations in a different light.
Correct.
Often it leads to interesting outcomes. Many of my mentees have gone on to do interesting things in their lives, and that gives me satisfaction that I have been able to help them in some way.
All right.
But I don't have a different approach to mentoring women versus mentoring men.
All right.
What I only try to be conscious about, that I do not have any preformed bias of who can do what, that women can do a certain kind of role and men can. So I try to consciously stay out of that bias. But other than that, my approach is not different.
Okay. All right. On that note, I would want to know, two women leaders or professionals now who have been doing well in their particular career in the domain, right? Or they know you and they have inspired you, and they're empowering others to join the field of cybersecurity.
So not just two, let me say three, one from each one of the significant roles.
More is better always.
So I had the pleasure of working with this lady called Susan Hall when I was in Microsoft. And over the years, I have found her more and more inspiring.
All right.
She faced some significant personal health challenges in life, but that did not pull her down. She took time off while recovering to actually go and do a master's in cybersecurity. And then she came back in more technically complex roles, and that is something I think is inspiring for everyone.
Okay.
And so it's that nobody can pull you down. Not even the hardest adversities can pull you down. You always, if you desire it, there is always a second chance and a third chance, and you just pull yourself up and keep moving, and you will get it. And she has been very, very inspiring over the years. I happened to travel to US for her graduation, and it was inspiring. Second, I would say, is a lady called Meher Afroz, a very close friend of mine. She has mentored me in more than once. She was the general manager and partner in Microsoft Core Services Engineering. To me, she was the emblem of how you lead with empathy and with empathy across different challenging technical projects, delivering deeply technical outcomes through very difficult timelines, but still lead with empathy. And that to me has always been inspiring, and something that I try to emulate as best as I can. And lastly, in my last job, I worked with a lady called Pooja Agrawal. She heads identity and access, and very insightful leader, a great attractor of talent. So many people I know just look up to her, and she has been able to attract again a lot of people to join our company, both men and women.
All right.
It has been inspiring.
You, as an experienced active speaker in these public forums, right, and workshops, you have been contributing to a lot in the inclusion of cybersecurity. What are your memorable moments or impactful stories around these engagements?
In conferences?
Yes.
Yeah, conferences are all about, I meet interesting people. And to me, that's an equally important dividend of going to these conferences, other than the technical learnings. I try as much as I can to be in touch with some of them. But again, as you know that once you start going to some of the conferences, you tend to meet the same set of people.
Correct.
in conferences. So that's a good way of being in touch.
All right. Because we are in the field of cybersecurity, right, Subrata ji? So now let's say every technology has its endpoint, and there are the new technologies arising every day or every 1 hour or every minute. There's something or the new coming up. Now, what would you give advice to young professionals? Because what happens is when something new comes out, everyone is hyped about it that we need to learn this. Now, if a young professional who's joining cybersecurity, or your advice to them to start experiencing, to create experiences in this domain?
I thought for a couple of seconds, because I realized that over the many years, my advice has not really changed.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I tell everyone is that focus on the core foundational skills. And that's becoming increasingly more and more critical. You must have the right engineering skills, you must have the right automation skills, you have to have the ability to think and act differently, you have to have the questioning mindset. And today, even more than in the past, we know that use of machine learning, massive cloud scale automations, now the opportunities of the generative AI tools that are coming up, many of the current roles will become redundant. You don't really need as many people in some of the places that we have large amount of staffing. So expect your role will get redundant, so you have to constantly reinvent yourself. And every year now that pressure is going to get more and more intense. Other thing that is also critical is data analysis skills. And historically, data analysts were a different breed of people who sat somewhere and did their own thing. But now, increasingly, everybody has to be a data analyst.
Yes.
You have to be able to make sense of the data, analyze it statistically. So that's the other skill that you need. Focus on learning and experimentation. Keep building wireframes, prototypes, things that test whether it works or not. Go for bug bounty hunting. Right? So to me, if I'm hiring, if you have even a $15 of bug bounty that you have won somewhere, it is far more important an indicator of your transferable skill and value than any number of certifications that you may have done. Right? I mean, if you have 5 different bug bounties totaling up to $35, to me, that shows something. I mean, even if you don't have a single certification, I don't really care. Right?
So that's
last but not the least, what I keep telling everyone is that checklists do not build a career. Right? I mean, if in your job you are basically running on a checklist, then something is wrong either with you or your role or the company. Just stop right there and question, right? And think what do you need to do next?
I think you just answered 3-4 questions I had in the start, and you covered every point there, that even certifications, even having these practical knowledge, like you mentioned in bug bounty, plays a very important role. So I think that sums up, if anyone, whoever is listening to this and will listen to this podcast, will get to know an idea that how they can go about it.
Absolutely. I would rather look at your GitHub contributions, your Stack Overflow contributions, your bug bounties you have won, where have you participated. If you participated in 15 and not yet won a single penny, it is still an important signal.
Right.
Then certifications. And certifications are okay, but not the highest fidelity indicator of who you are.
Okay. All right. Now, one of my last questions, because you love experimenting, you love attending conferences. One of the upcoming conferences is of BSides Bangalore 2024. Now, you have attended these conferences in the past and you mentioned it. So, what stood out for you then, and what do you expect to look for the upcoming conference?
Number one, I love it that it's such a melting pot of ideas, different kinds of topics, subjects, and kind of speakers who come and speak. I love it that it brings a diverse set of people into one forum, from the people who are fairly senior in their career journey to people who are early in their career journey. Everybody is in that one melting pot and interacting, and there's always something to gain. The quality of conversation, I think, is excellent in BSides conferences, and I want that to continue. And last but not the least, right, it helps me make new connections, and to me, that's the greatest value of all.
All right. Thanks a lot. Everyone, we're going to put in Suvaji's handle and you can reach out to him. I think he's a lovely person and he'll answer your queries or any doubts you have, given that he has a lot of depth and knowledge into what he's doing and what he can give us a pathway to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, conferences, and I want that to continue. And last but not the least, right, it helps me make new connections. And to me, that's the greatest value of all.
All right. So,
I mean, it's an industry which has grown a lot, but cybersecurity is still a small industry, and it's still all about people.
Hey there, thank you so much for tuning into our episode of this particular podcast. Now, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed creating it for you. We would be very grateful to you if you could just like, share, subscribe our BSides Bangalore channel so that it reaches more people. Now, you're the reason what we do and why we do. We will appreciate your continued support. Stay tuned for the next episode.